you'll see on that board over there that there's a little matchbox, and we called it Karma Yuga, which is the right every wrong generation. And the idea was very simple, that how can we make people think about how they can make a big difference in the world with their small, simple actions. And I see a book here which is called 365 Ways to Change the World. I have seen the book online. And the book has brilliant ideas about how, through our simple actions, we can change the world. The book has been written by none other than Michael Norton, who's a globally renowned philanthropist, wears many hats, is also the author of this book, which is a word-of-mouth bestseller. And The Guardian describes him as Michael Norton is a one-man ideas factory. Proud to have him with us today at Rex Ideas for Action, the curtain raiser event. May we please have Mr. Michael Norton on stage, please. A lot of synergies, and I first reached out to Michael over Facebook and said that very impressed by what you're doing. Michael's also the founder of Unlimited and the Hub, where he encourages social entrepreneurship. And Michael's going to speak on we can all change the world with our simple actions. So friends, Michael Norton.
Good afternoon. You've almost given all my speech in 2 seconds, but I'll plow on anyway. And just to say, I'm an activist rather than a philanthropist. And I don't like being told what to do, so when the 12 minutes or whatever comes up, I may carry on speaking.
Sure, okay.
Okay.
Let's see who wins the battle.
I'm going to talk to you on the subject that we can all change the world. I'm not going to talk about what I do and why I'm in India at the moment, my work in India. That will come up a bit, perhaps, or in questions. So, today's talk is all about being an activist. The world is full of problems, and we've heard many of them so far: education, environment, whatever. But problems need solutions, and if we don't find solutions to the problems, nothing happens. And it's not governments that make a difference, it's people taking action when they see something that needs doing, and then organising to get it done. And just 2 examples. One is a very big issue, which was the slave trade. And it was Clarkson and Wilberforce who together combined to lead that campaign to abolish slavery. And in Delhi, you were being poisoned by motor car fumes and other emissions. And it was, I think he was a lawyer, M.C. Mehta, who got a law passed by the Delhi government to ban emissions from public service vehicles. And I remember being in Delhi at midnight before it was due to come into force, and they were still arguing about whether it could be delayed further, but it wasn't. And now we can breathe clean air in Delhi. So these are people who did it, and they leave a legacy behind for future generations. And there's also a multiplier effect. The more people who do things, the more we'll be able to solve our problems. And we've heard about the imminent threat of global warming, and it requires many, many, many millions of people to do things to make a difference about it. So, what can one person do? Well, I want to tell you about Ryan, who's a 6-year-old Canadian boy. He's not 6 in this photo, he's about 13, who was at school one day, and his teacher was talking about the water problems in the world, and how there were mainly women who spent hours a day fetching dirty water for their families. And his 6-year-old brain started going into overdrive, thinking, I can turn on the tap and get clean water. Why can't they? And what can I do about it? So he decided he'd like to build a well. And he went home and he said to his mum, can I have $100? Why do you want $100? I want to build a well in Africa. And his mother came from a blue-collar family. They weren't well off. And she said, Ryan, I'm sorry, don't just have we don't just have that sort of money. But ask your dad when he comes home from work. So Dad comes home from the factory, and Ryan again asks, and the same answer. But children have amazing pester power. They go on and on and on until they get what they want. And Ryan's parents had a chat, and they said to him, Ryan, look, we won't give you the money, but you can earn it. And you can earn it by doing jobs around the house. You can keep your room tidy, you can do your homework, you can wash the dishes, you can help Dad wash the car, you can clear the leaves off the lawn. And very soon, Ryan had collected his $100, and he took it in a cardboard shoebox to an organisation called Water Can, which is the water NGO in Canada. And he met someone, he said, here's $100 and I'd like to build a well. And the man looked at him as if he was from sort of Mars and said, I'm sorry, Ryan, a well costs $2,000 to build. Never mind, he said, I'll just go and earn it. So Ryan goes off, and with the help of his friends and parents and the other parents in the school, they soon raise the $2,000 that needed. In the meantime, there's been press publicity, and a business person agrees to pay for Ryan to go out to northern Kenya for the opening of his well. So he goes out, and in his little speech, and remember he's a 6-year-old kid, he says, this is the proudest moment of my life. But in fact it wasn't, it was just a starting point, because since then they came back and they set up the Ryan's Well Foundation, which has built more than 400 wells in Africa. This is about 15 years later. They've brought clean water to maybe 1.5 million people. Ryan has gone around the school system in Canada speaking about water activism and how people can make a difference. He's probably spoken at the United Nations as well. One ordinary child seeing a problem, being persistent enough to do something about it, and getting something done has changed the lives of millions of people. And if Ryan can do it, a 6-year-old can do it, so can we all do it. And I want you just to remember that. And one of the things is that I think one needs to have a big vision about what one wants to do. My next story is, sorry, I've got the things I thought of. It's about having a big vision of what you want to do, and having that vision and turning those visions into practice. And my next story is about this lady called Jerry Moria, who I met in Bombay, and this was about 14 years ago. And she had a small organisation called Childline, which was a telephone helpline service for street children and vulnerable children in Bombay. And if there's a problem, anyone could ring a free number, 1098, and get the problem solved. And the idea was this might spread across India. And I actually worked with Jerry to spread the idea across India. And today it's in over 210 cities. It's helped over 4 million children. And it's an integral part of what Jerry believes is the necessary child rights and protection that should be offered to street children in India. But she didn't stop there. She then went on to set up Child Helpline International to spread the idea of telephone helplines for vulnerable children across the world. And she's now working on another project. She's a serial social entrepreneur, and she's absolutely brilliant. Now, one of the things is that we sometimes need structures and systems to help us through this process of bringing ideas to fruition. I helped Jerry with the strategy and with the fundraising for expanding Childline from Bombay out across India. And we've set up a foundation in Mumbai called Unlimited India, and its aim is to bring people's dreams of a better world to life by offering them support in the form of money, networking, peer meeting other people, contacts, and technical expertise such as business planning and so on to people. And I want to just tell you 2 stories of people that we've helped. The first is Ashok Rathod, founder of Oscar, not a privileged kid, and he had a love of football, and he wanted to introduce football to his peer group of children in Bombay. And he set up an organisation called Oscar, which stands for something, but I don't know, can't remember what it is. And through Oscar, he does football training across, well, in the city, and he's now being hired to do it in other cities as well. When we met him, I think he was 17 years old, couldn't speak a word of English, but he had two brilliant ideas. One was that in return for football practice, the kids had to give something back, and what they gave back was study time to do homework so they become more literate and therefore improve their lives. And the second thing was, and I thought this was real inspiration, they have their football practice on the Maidan in the centre of Mumbai, which is a space inhabited by rich kids in cricket whites doing cricket practice. And they have every right to that space as any other citizen of Mumbai. And I love the idea that he brought his group there to claim that space as his practice ground. He was named by, I think, Frontline India, but it might be one of the other magazines, as one of the 50 people changing the face of modern India. And today he's a personable young man who speaks really good English, and he's got great ambitions for this project. What was that? And my next one is Vijay Pastada, who runs something called Under the Mango Tree. Her dream was that every farm in India would have a beehive, not just to create honey, but to enhance pollination of the farm. And she started doing this by creating a brand called Under the Mango Tree, buying honey from farmers and spooning it into glass jars in her flat in Mumbai, and then trying to sell it around health food shops and things like that. We gave her an award. I interviewed her. She was terrific, and we were delighted to give her that award. And then I met her again 2 years later, and she was spooning more honey into more jars and had 2 staff, and 1 intern and 1 foreign volunteer, but still had this big dream. I then met her 5 days after that, after which time she'd been up to see the Chief Minister of Gujarat, and she'd been given a contract to train 20,000 farmers in beekeeping. So, starting small, having a big vision, you will get there. It may not be a straight journey, you may not get there immediately, you may even get somewhere else. But my favourite quotation, which I just shared with someone, is that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And take that step, and you're committed. You're going in approximately the right direction. And the second step is easier than the first, and so on and so on. Now, it's ideas that change the world, and this process I call social innovation, social invention. I just want to briefly give you a few ideas I've come across in the last couple of weeks of people who've come to me in London to talk about their projects. One is street doctors. This is a very simple idea that young doctors go out on the streets and they teach first aid to gang leaders and gang members, and particularly dealing with gunshot wounds and knife wounds. And they reckon if they can prolong the life of a person by 10 minutes till an ambulance comes, they can save a life. What's really interesting is the incidence of gang violence has gone right down in the communities where they've been doing this. And I think this project could spread from Liverpool, where it started, across the UK and even across the world. I think it's a brilliant project. Don't Be That Someone is a crash course for teenage drunk drivers and their passengers to not do that. And I think probably in India it's probably quite a good idea to have something like that as well. And it does save lives. Sock Mob Events is homeless tours of London, homeless people leading tours of the city from their perspective. One of the projects Unlimited India's funded is reality tours, which takes people to Dharavi. It's a rather similar project. So sometimes you see good ideas popping up all over the place. Student Tutors is another nice project. It's a platform where students and people a couple of years up the ladder can negotiate for the older person who's been through the course to tutor the younger person, at a rate they agree between themselves, which will be a lot cheaper than going to a professional tutor. And I think that has huge potential as well. The farm shop is, we've got a lot of empty shops in London, in England, in Britain, and someone's had the brilliant idea of using a farm, using a shop to have a farm to grow things and to encourage local food growing in back gardens and rooftops and yards and things like that. But you have to make the idea work, and that process is called social entrepreneurship. I haven't got time to do this, but a friend of mine is starting a fish farm in a container in South Africa, and I think it's a brilliant idea, but he's having to work really hard to make it work. And the first year he's spent making mistakes. The second year he'll get to a point where it will work. The third year he'll find 6 farmers in townships to have these containers and to grow fish. And he's already had inquiries. Well, last week he wrote to me from Nicaragua and the north of England and many other countries. So growing protein for a hungry world, where lack of protein causes stunting and lack of brain development and actually affects people's life chances much more than bad education does, is something which I think is really important. So, what about you? What's your contribution going to be? Because as individuals, we're not just professional social workers, we're also human beings. As residents of this planet, we have a duty to look at the issues and as leaders to do something about those issues and to mobilize people behind us and to create change. Because the world needs us and it needs our ideas, it needs our energy, it needs our activism. So this is the book I've done. I'm not trying to sell it because I haven't got any copies anyway. But this is the English edition. There has been an Indian edition, and the best-selling edition was actually the Chinese edition in Chinese. But this is a starting point for many people because it gives you small ideas that you can work on for big issues, and with the thought that once you get going and you can see that you can make a small difference, you might do a bit more and make a bigger difference, and then do even more and make a huge difference. You might mobilize people around you through what you're doing to encourage them to do it too. And you have this amazing multiplier effect of millions of people doing millions of things together, making a huge difference in the world. So that's what I've got to say. Be active citizens. Don't just sit there in the face of problems. Do something, and whatever you do, learn from it and do it better next time and become brilliant about it. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. That was bang on time. The activist in Michael and the activist in me didn't have to battle each other, right? So thank you, Michael. We'll take questions from Michael, please. Questions for Michael? Yes. Devendra has a question for Michael.
Thank you, Michael, for your talk. And I think it's very useful that you have a book which can give people ideas, or at least get them thinking about ideas. But I think one problem that arises is that once you have an idea, sometimes you need some funding or some money to support the idea to become real. So I think that is a big challenge. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes. I mean, the first thought is that never make money the deciding factor. Think about what you can do with no money. When I give talks on fundraising, I always say you should have 3 plans. Plan A is what you want to do and the budget to do it. Plan B is scaling it down to a much lower level, just because you're not going to be able to raise a huge amount of money. So you want to do something anyway. And plan C is to do it with no money at all. What can you do with absolutely no money? And you'll be surprised, actually. And by getting started on something, you'll begin to build a track record, credibility, traction with donors, and you'll get the money. If you sit at the beginning and say, I need a lot of money before I get started, I don't think it's hard to get anywhere. So money is not the determining factor. In fact, the first thing I did on my own was, in my early 20s, I organised a language teaching scheme for immigrant children and families in the UK. Many of them came from the Indian subcontinent. They were the first people to arrive en masse in London, in England, without speaking the language. The schools were having a big problem. I actually didn't know any of this. I just thought there was something I wanted to do, and I was going to do it. So I organised a language teaching programme, which at its peak had about 250 volunteers going and giving one lesson a week in people's homes. And we had another bit of it, which was a school for Bengali kids in the East End of London with 70 volunteers. I had no money, no bank account, no name for the organisation, no charitable status, and together we were able to do it through our combined energies and creativity.
Thank you, Michael. I would like to second that because this is actually what I teach in leadership trainings, that sitting on the jury of the Global Social Venture Competition, a lot of people come and present ideas. And when we say that, okay, that's a brilliant idea, but will you do it if you get the funding? No, we've already got an offer letter from Bain and Company. And then we're like, why did you come here to present the idea and spoil someone else's opportunity? Having said that, when we started iCONGO, CII wanted to incubate us. But if CII had incubated us, we wouldn't have been able to take stands against industry who are doing wrong. So we said no to the incubation, right? We had no resources, but what we had was resourcefulness. Find the means, find the end, find the purpose, the means will follow. Yeah. So I think that's a question which I also ask a lot of people when they say, we have this idea but we have no funding. And I'm like, what if you don't find the funding? Then we can't do the idea. And that shows you what the intent and integrity is all about. Yeah?
Yeah, I would say our relationship as society isn't a child with a parent going to them for pocket money and only being able to do things if they give us permission. We jolly well get out and do it, and we find a way of doing it.
Yes. I think the intent, integrity, and the courage of conviction to do it is most important. Yes? Yes, Sai.
Hi, I'm Sai. So I would like to ask you what drives you to do what you're doing? Like any instance that you can trace back? Or any particular thing that happened that drives you to actually do what you're doing?
I sometimes talk about trigger points where your life could go in one direction or another direction. And my trigger point was actually when I left university and got my first job. My father said to me, "Are you going to volunteer?" And I was socially unaware, and I didn't really know what volunteering was. But for just sake of peace, I thought I'd say, well, why not? And he said, there's someone I can introduce you to, because when I was your age, I went to a youth club once a week as a volunteer youth leader, and why don't you do the same? The man he introduced me to had the improbable name of Yogi Bear, actually, and I trotted along, and I got involved in that, going Monday evenings for a couple of years. I just want to share with you actually a story from that, because one of the things I did was I organised some of the young people to visit old people in the community. And one evening, these three 14-year-old girls came up to me with a broad smile on their face, and I asked them, why are you smiling? And they said, well, we've just taken a lady out for a walk. I said, why does that make you smile? And they said, well, she hasn't been out of her apartment for 2 years. So what did you do? They said, we borrowed a wheelbarrow, we filled it with cushions, we carried her down the stairs, we wheeled her to the shops, and for the first time in 2 years, she was able to go out and do something in the shops and to buy things. And the social workers, the health workers, the local authority workers, the care workers, the highly paid professionals hadn't had the idea that they might find a way of getting her out of the flat. 3 14-year-old girls had done it, and they'd done it just through their own personal creativity of finding a solution to the problem. Now, after that, I decided that I would start my own organisation, which was this language teaching thing. It was a volunteer thing. I was working as a publisher and a banker, and I just got so interested in the idea that we could change the world, we could make a difference, that I ended up pursuing a career in that after a career in banking and publishing. So when I was about 30, having been the managing director of a publishing company, I decided to devote myself full-time trying to change the world and make it different. If I was honest, I would say over the last 40 years, I'm not sure the world's got better, but at least I've tried.
Thank you. We take one more question. We have a question from Jagdish.
Hi, this is Jagdish. Just a small comment which to Michael is that a lot of ideas actually, if they go through a technology audit, they don't even need that much of budget in the first place. So my humble request to all the people in the argument is that get your idea, technology and social media audit done, because a lot of ideas deal with people and technology solves a lot of things which you are budgeting for. You may not even need that money.
Yeah. Can I say that in the face of the current economic climate in my country and in many countries of Europe, and probably in North America as well, we're going to have to invent new ways of doing things. The idea there's a tap of grants from governments and foundations and corporates just waiting to be tapped for your project is becoming less possible as needs grow, demands increase, and the supply of funds diminishes. We've got a real crisis in the UK. So we're going to have to try to invent new ways of doing things. And I just want to share two things with you. One is the idea of reciprocity. We've had a sort of, it's like a sort of a credit card in a hole in the wall. You go and you get some free cash for your project. And some of the ways we deal with our beneficiaries is the same. We hand out services to them. We expect nothing back. So Unlimited in the UK is a bit like that. We got £100 million from the lottery as our endowment, and we make awards to people, and we never expect anything back from them. If we said to them, pay it back if you can, and pay it forward to someone else to help someone else with the experience of your journey, we'd have created ripples and even a whole movement of social entrepreneurship, just by using that sort of idea of reciprocity. And actually, in India, because we didn't have that 100 million endowment, we had to fight hard for every penny we've got to run the organisation and make awards. People are coming back to us voluntarily and offering to pay back their awards. So I think Vijaya, who I showed you, has repaid her award to us so we can help someone else like her. So that's one way. Another way is illustrated by a project I'm doing we've got a lot of empty spaces and community centres are closing because the charities or public bodies can't afford a centre manager and a sort of assistant caretaker. So it costs about 50 lakhs to run a premises even before you get started. So they haven't got that, so they're closing. So I've taken over 2 empty properties. And I've got the property owner to agree to pay for the heating, lighting, property taxes and maintenance for that, on the basis I will turn them from a public liability, which is an empty, unused, vandalised premises, into a public asset. And we're filling them with social entrepreneurs who are then going to do 2 things. They're going to run the thing themselves in return for getting free space. And they're going to work on the housing estates where these properties are located as their contribution to the local community. And my challenge is to see if we can run this same premises in a different way with no money at all, but using a sort of exchange economy. I think we've got to be creative in how we address this whole problem of resources. And as you say, resourcefulness is more important than the resources.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael. And please feel free to interact with Michael. He's going to be here with us tomorrow also.
Thank you, Mike.